and I'm quitting alcohol. So last night I went to the grade 1 disco. My son had a fucking disco going on. And so I went fulfilling my duties as a father. I'm not enjoying doing all this school bullshit either, by the way. Fucking parent day one day, year 1 disco the next day. It's too much. And the kids don't even remember either. They don't remember specific things. All they remember is like, was he a good dad or not? And that's like a pretty broad spectrum. Like, you don't have to do that much for your kids to consider you a good parent. You have to do fuck all, to be honest with you. All you need to do is not be a complete fuck up. And your kids will generally think you were great. I was fucking asking my son the other day, he bought in this book. I'm like, I read that book to you maybe 300 times when you were like 3. Do you remember that? He's like, what? I'm like, I read this to you so many times that you memorized every single word in the book. Do you remember Dada fucking reading you this book? He's like, no. I'm like, well, fucking, what was the point then? How can you not remember this book? Surely you remember it. We were in lockdown in Melbourne and I read it to you so many fucking times, it almost drove me insane. And you can't even remember that. Honestly, if you couldn't remember that, fucking what's the point? So anyway, I was down at the fucking disco, the grade 1 disco with all the fucking parents doing the parent thing, and fucking an old friend of mine, Claire. I actually have known Claire for like 20 years. Like, we haven't been close for 20 years, but I met her the same time I met my friend Horn. And I've known Horn for fucking 20 years, so I've known her for 20 years. Obviously, I haven't stayed in touch with her or anything, but I fucking saw her and I'm like, fuck, is that Claire? It fucking looks like Claire. And then she looked straight at me and she gave me like this sort of blank stare. And I'm like, I'm fucking sure that's her. Maybe she doesn't remember me. Fucking who cares? And then we went into the disco and fucking she walks over to me and I'm like, Claire. And she's like, Boyle. I'm like, yeah, I fucking saw you outside. I didn't think you recognized me. She's like, I didn't think you'd be here doing the whole fucking dad thing. I'm like, yeah, well, things change. Things change very fucking quickly. So I had a little catch up with her. I'm like, what are you doing these days? She's like, I'm a fucking corporate lawyer for a big food company. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's nice. Then she was saying she's got 3 kids. I'm like, fucking, how do you juggle that with your job? And she's like, yeah, it's quite the challenge. And I'm like, what does your husband do? And she's like, he's a doctor. I'm like, oh, yeah, same. Your family and my family sound exactly the same. It's like we've gone down the same paths. I was kind of thinking like, why is your kid going to this fucking poor ass public school then? With all the other plebs, like us. So that was kind of sweet. She's cool. And then fucking an hour at the fucking grade 1 disco was not cool. They were playing songs from like the 80s and shit. And the kids knew the fucking songs too. It's like, what's wrong with these kids? What's the latest shit out? I don't even know what the latest shit out is. I forced my kid to listen to Bob Dylan. That fucking grade 1 energy is like, it's too much. I stood there for an hour. And after an hour of just watching these little fucking rats run around and scream and fucking cry, there was a lot of crying going on. I was exhausted. I was just like done. It sucked all the energy out of me. And you're looking around at the other parents and you're like, how the fuck did you end up here? Honestly, you look around at the other parents at the fucking grade 1 disco and some of them look like they've been parents since they were like 18. Not like they've had kids since they were 18, but they look like parenthood was in their blood. You see those ones? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, you'll see someone and their kid will be 3, like their first kid will be like 3 or 4, but you look at them and you're like, fuck, you look like you've been a mum for 12 years. This does not look like your first fucking kid. I don't mean looks-wise, I mean vibe-wise. Also looks-wise. There is a few floating around that look like it might be their 6th or 7th kid. Jesus Christ, my kid's going to have to fucking change schools if this ever gets into the hands of the fucking parents. But you do. You look around at the parents and you're like, fucking, what are the decisions you made to lead here? There's a few in there that seem like their kid may have not been planned. And they're still coming to terms with what the fuck is going on. 6 years later. The 1,000-yard stare. Yeah, I love my kid, but what the fuck happened to my life? They're my favorite parent as well. The what the fuck is this parent? What is this life I'm leading now? My most hated parent is this child was the greatest gift I ever received. Gross. Look around. There's 400 other fucking kids running around like little fucks as well. Yours is no different from the rest of them. Trust me. But it would be a little bit of a fucking shock for people who knew me when I was younger, seeing me like feed an icy pole to my daughter while I'm like carrying her and like bouncing her around. Because in my youth, there was no real sign that was ever going to happen. That did not look like my future. My future looked more like he'll probably die in a gutter somewhere. And I would have fucking agreed with that assessment. And now I'm at the grade 1 disco, dancing with my fucking like 2-year-old daughter. She turns fucking 2 in September. Can you believe that shit? I've been podcasting her whole life. If you go back 2 years in this podcast, this is why this podcast is amazing and you should join the Patreon. All you need to do is go back fucking 2 years from fucking September 30, and it would have been the day my fucking daughter was born. Now she's 2 years older and she's walking around and talking and shit. Fuck, she's got some attitude. She is a complete Boyle, my daughter. She has a long fucking road ahead of her. She has all my traits and it's not a good thing. Yeah, so fucking seeing me bouncing around with 2 kids. For someone who hasn't seen me for like, let's say 15, 18 years or something like that, and knew me when I was fucking younger, must be a little bit jarring. In the back of their mind, I bet you they're thinking, should he even be allowed to have kids? That seems dangerous. But things change. They don't change that much because like 2.5 weeks ago, I was fucking doing cocaine, ketamine, and MD in another country, but I wasn't drinking, so things have changed. Anyway, my wife's gone out for a fucking party. She won't be back for like a day and a half. So it's just me and the fucking kids, and possibly Dino's coming over, or I'll be doing the first fucking installment of the Andrew Roberts Show tonight. Let's see what happens. The Andrew Roberts Show is Patreon only, by the way. That is not getting released to the public. That has to stay in a dark, dark corner. Anyway, I'm fucking doing this while my daughter's asleep and I put my son on the fucking iPad. So I better go back out there and see if they're both still alive. So fucking enjoy the rest of your weekend and I'll see you the fuck later.